You're standing on the sun-soaked shore of the Red Sea, and in front of you is a perfectly ordinary resort. The kind you'd never look at twice. There's scuba gear lined up outside a bungalow, a few tourists lounging around, and someone preparing dinner in the kitchen. It looks harmless, peaceful, boring even. What no one knows is that this resort is a front. It's been built, staffed, and run by Mossad.
If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment. Your feedback helps shape what we cover next, and you being here keeps the conversation going. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.
It exists not to serve tourists but to rescue thousands of Ethiopian Jews from persecution. This is not a vacation spot, it's an escape route, and it's working. In the early 1980s, Ethiopia was in crisis. Civil war, political chaos, and systemic oppression made it nearly impossible for Ethiopian Jews to survive, let alone practice their faith or live in peace. The Beta Israel community faced isolation, violence, and targeted persecution. The only way out was through Sudan, a country with no formal ties to Israel and little patience for its neighbors' covert operations. But despite the danger, thousands began the journey. They walked for days, sometimes weeks, across treacherous terrain. Many died along the way. Those who made it reached refugee camps in Sudan where life didn't get much better. The camps were overcrowded, under-resourced, and brutal. There were no guarantees of safety, and certainly no promises of rescue. But in Israel, the mission was clear: these people had to be saved. The question was how. Previous efforts to extract refugees had failed or were too limited in scale. Traditional diplomacy wasn't an option. Direct military intervention would have triggered international backlash and put the refugees in even more danger. What Mossad proposed next wasn't just unconventional, it was outrageous. They would open a fake tourist resort. Not just a cover story on paper, a real, fully functioning seaside hotel on Sudan's coastline, complete with staff, amenities, bookings, and brochures. All of it would serve one purpose: to create a legitimate front for smuggling people out of the country unnoticed. The plan required an almost obsessive level of detail. Mossad operatives created Swiss shell companies, forged business documents, and secured legal ownership of an abandoned resort. They renovated the buildings, ordered scuba gear, and began running the place like a real business. European tourists were targeted with ads in diving magazines. And it worked. Real guests showed up, paid money, and stayed at the resort. While they snorkeled, sipped drinks, and sunbathed, Mossad agents worked behind the scenes to locate and move refugees. Every night, operations were conducted in total secrecy. Teams would leave the resort in unmarked vehicles, make contact with refugees, and lead them through the desert under the cover of darkness. The evacuees were brought to the coast, where Israeli naval vessels waited just offshore. Boats would slip in silently. Refugees were loaded quickly. And within hours, they were on their way to safety. The scale of precision here can't be overstated. Every mission was timed to the minute. Lights at the resort were used as silent signals. The entire operation depended on maintaining a flawless illusion: during the day, a normal resort; at night, a covert rescue hub. And they did this for years. It wasn't a one-off stunt. Operation Brothers ran across multiple years, extracting thousands of Ethiopian Jews. The resort stayed open. The guests never knew. The Sudanese government remained unaware, and Mossad kept the entire thing operating like a well-oiled machine. But the risks were constant. Sudan was hostile to Israel. Any discovery would have meant arrests, international fallout, and almost certain death for the refugees involved. Mossad agents had to live under permanent cover even with local staff. They couldn't slip, they couldn't falter, they couldn't afford even the smallest mistake. And when suspicions began to rise, because no cover story lasts forever, they pushed harder. They increased the number of refugees moved per night. Larger waves, more boats, faster turnarounds. It became a race against time. Eventually, it became clear that the resort couldn't continue. The operation was shut down, but not before its mission was accomplished. Thousands of people were saved, families were reunited, lives were preserved. Operation Brothers didn't end with the resort. What Mossad learned from this operation directly influenced future missions, most notably Operation Solomon, a massive airlift in 1991 that evacuated over 14,000 Ethiopian Jews to Israel in under 2 days. That airlift was built on the lessons, infrastructure, and intelligence gathered during the resort phase. Without Operation Brothers, Operation Solomon may not have been possible. But Operation Brothers was more than a logistical success. It was a moral stand. It proved that covert operations didn't have to be about sabotage, destruction, or war. They could be about life. about survival, about doing what's right even when the path to get there is so bizarre it sounds made up. Because who would believe that a diving resort in Sudan saved thousands of lives? That trained intelligence officers spent years pretending to be hotel staff, managing real bookings and fake passports simultaneously. That Mossad's best agents weren't just gathering intel, but folding towels and pouring drinks in between midnight missions. But it happened. The silence surrounding Operation Brothers wasn't just for operational security, it was built into the DNA of the mission. Mossad never sought recognition. The agents didn't want applause. They understood that the best operations often live in the shadows and stay there. Even the refugees themselves didn't know who had helped them. They were passed from contact to contact, loaded onto boats, and told nothing. Only later, much later, did some of them learn the truth that their rescuers had been hiding in plain sight. It's one of the rare stories in the world of espionage where no one died in a botched operation, where the plan actually worked, and where the outcome was a large-scale humanitarian success. No glory, no headlines, just lives saved. The Red Sea diving resort is gone now. What remains is the legacy of an operation so daring, so wildly unexpected, that it changed the way rescue missions could be done. It blurred the line between intelligence work and moral duty, and it left behind generations of people who are alive today because someone refused to let them disappear. If this story caught you off guard, you're not alone. What stood out to you the most? Drop your thoughts below. Like if you think this kind of operation deserves to be remembered, and subscribe if you want more stories where the truth is stranger and more powerful than fiction, because the world is full of secrets and some of them save lives. The Red Sea coast doesn't give away any secrets. It's the kind of place that hides everything in plain sight, calm, sun-bleached, empty today. There's no trace of what once happened there. The buildings are gone, the dive signs have faded, the beach is just a beach again. But for the people who were there, for the agents who built it, for the families who escaped through it, for the silent network that made it all work, that stretch of coastline will never be just scenery. Because this was the stage for one of the boldest covert rescue missions in modern history. Operation Brothers wasn't glamorous, it wasn't clean, it was improvised, unstable, and constantly one step away from disaster. But it worked. And what made it work wasn't just Mossad's operational brilliance, it was their total commitment to an impossible idea. Start with this: you have thousands of Ethiopian Jews trapped in Sudan. They've fled violence, famine, and religious persecution. They've crossed deserts on foot, many are sick, some are dying. They're stuck in refugee camps in a hostile country under the radar of international attention, and they have no way out. And Israel knew it couldn't wait. The Israeli government had already recognized the Beta Israel community as Jewish. That meant bringing them to Israel wasn't just a matter of policy, it was a matter of national and moral obligation. But Sudan wouldn't allow open evacuations. Diplomacy was a dead end. The region was crawling with foreign interests, military forces, and political tension. This was not a friendly environment. So Mossad, in typical Mossad fashion, decided to solve the problem by rewriting the rules. They didn't sneak across the border in disguise, they didn't bribe their way in and out of the camps. They built a tourist resort, a fake business that was actually real, a beachfront escape where scuba diving was the advertised product and international rescue was the actual mission. Every piece of this cover had to be bulletproof. The agents didn't just pretend to be resort staff, they became resort staff. They printed brochures, planted articles in European travel publications, imported diving equipment, renovated the old Italian-built buildings. They trained themselves to act like hotel managers and dive instructors. They hosted real guests, took real payments, and served real drinks to people who had no idea they were standing in a live theater of espionage. This wasn't a front with a thin layer of legitimacy. It was a functioning business, and because it was real, it never drew suspicion. While the tourists enjoyed the sunsets, Mossad teams were driving out into the Sudanese desert in trucks and jeeps, meeting up with Ethiopian refugees in prearranged hiding spots. These refugees, many of them families with small children, would be transported silently to the shoreline in the dead of night. From there, Israeli Navy boats stationed just off the coast would approach without lights or noise. The coordination had to be flawless. Every light signal, every landing, every transport had to sync up perfectly. There was no room for improvisation once the boats were in motion. The teams used coded radio calls. They used simple tricks like turning on certain lights in the resort at certain hours to signal that the coast was clear. And it wasn't just about getting the refugees onto the boats. The agents had to make sure the resort still looked normal the next morning. Tourists couldn't suspect anything. Sudanese authorities couldn't see anything unusual. Every trace of the night's operation had to be gone before breakfast was served. This is the part that defies belief, that they managed to do this for years. Not weeks, not months, years. They pulled off thousands of extractions under the radar. No one was caught in the act. No major intelligence leak ever exposed them. Sudan didn't realize what was happening until long after the fact, and by then, it was too late. Eventually, as the operation grew and Sudanese suspicion increased, the risk became unsustainable. Mossad pulled out. The resort was quietly shut down, but by then, the mission had succeeded far beyond its original scope. It would go on to inspire the next wave of operations, including Operation Solomon, the massive 1991 airlift that brought over 14,000 Ethiopian Jews to Israel in less than 36 hours. But Operation Solomon never would have worked without the lessons of Operation Brothers, the coordination between air and land, the tactics for moving people invisibly through enemy territory, the proof that unconventional methods, when executed with discipline and daring, can succeed where traditional diplomacy fails. And beyond all the logistics, all the espionage, all the cover identities and radio codes, there was the human core. The lives saved. Because this wasn't a mission designed to gain influence or steal secrets. It wasn't about politics or leverage. It was about rescuing a community that had been forgotten by the rest of the world. A community whose roots went back thousands of years. A community whose faith had survived in isolation and who now faced extinction. Mossad did what no one else could or would do. They stepped in, quietly, risked everything, and built an escape hatch into one of the most closed-off corners of the world. And for the people rescued through this operation, the experience was surreal. One moment, they were hiding in the dark, praying they wouldn't be discovered. The next, they were being helped into boats by strangers who didn't speak their language but clearly meant to save them. Some of the refugees didn't even know where they were going. They were told only to trust. Many thought they were dreaming when they saw the Israeli flag for the first time. Others wept openly. For them, the resort wasn't just a launch point. It was the line between death and life, between being forgotten and being found. Most of them never saw the agents again. Those agents returned to their lives in Israel or elsewhere. Their names were never made public. Their work remained classified for years. Even when the truth came out, it didn't make headlines in the way you'd expect for a mission of this scale. And maybe that's what makes Operation Brothers so remarkable. It wasn't designed to be famous. It was designed to work, and it did. To this day, it stands as one of the most unusual and effective rescue missions ever conducted, one that turned the tools of espionage into instruments of mercy. And now that the story out, it deserves to be remembered not just as a Mossad success but as a model for what happens when intelligence is used for protection, not destruction. When cover stories hide lifelines. When the most unbelievable plan is also the one that saves the most lives. There's something unforgettable about a story like this, not because it's flashy or bloody or packed with action movie explosions, but because it quietly redefines what's possible when human lives are on the line. Think about it. Mossad, Israel's intelligence agency, known globally for sharp operations and stealth takedowns, took one of its most valuable resources, its covert force, and instead of sending them to eliminate a threat, they sent them to save people. Thousands of people, using a tourist resort. This wasn't a story of brute force or military flexing. This was tactical empathy wrapped in operational genius, a humanitarian mission masquerading as leisure business. And it worked not because of luck but because of relentless planning, unbelievable courage, and a moral compass that didn't flinch. Every guest who came through that resort had no idea they were walking through a live operation. No idea that beyond the huts and diving gear, operatives were coordinating night rescues, intercepting terrified families in the desert, and slipping them into boats bound for freedom. But for the Mossad agents, it was all-consuming. They lived double lives every single day, host by day, operative by night, friend to locals, handler to naval teams, every smile had to be calculated, every interaction measured. If one tourist got too curious, if one local staff member started connecting dots, the entire mission would go up in flames. This wasn't just about keeping secrets, it was about keeping everyone alive. Because Sudan wasn't just another developing nation, it was enemy territory. Israel had no relations with Sudan. If the government had discovered what was happening on that beach, there would have been no trial, no appeals. The refugees, the agents, the entire network, they would have vanished. And that's what made the stakes so high. There was no plan B, no extraction if things went sideways. It was all or nothing every night for years. Even more intense, the psychological strain. These agents weren't switching off after work. There was no home. They lived inside the lie, ate inside it, slept inside it, knowing that any mistake, any hesitation could get someone killed, maybe themselves, maybe the refugees, maybe both. And still they kept going. They didn't quit when missions failed, they didn't stop when it became harder, they scaled up. They found ways to move more people faster. They took bolder risks with less room for error because they understood what delay meant. Every day lost was another life lost. The mission wasn't just urgent, it was sacred. And then, once the Sudanese government started closing in, they did the hardest thing anyone in their position could have done. They walked away. Not because the mission failed, but because it had succeeded. Thousands had made it out, the resort had served its purpose. The story didn't need a dramatic ending, it needed a clean exit, one last quiet checkout, and then nothing but silence. No one knew what had just happened. The resort emptied, the boats stopped coming, and just like that, one of the most daring operations in Mossad's history dissolved into the wind. But the ripple effect was massive. Operation Brothers didn't just save thousands of lives, it changed how Israel approached rescue missions. It laid the foundation for Operation Solomon. It reshaped how covert ops could be used for humanitarian work. And it showed the world that moral conviction could thrive even in the coldest, most calculated corners of global intelligence. And yet for decades, nobody knew. It stayed hidden, the operatives stayed silent. The people they saved went on with their lives, many never knowing who helped them or how it happened, and that's what makes it all even more remarkable. No one did it for credit, no one expected to be thanked. They did it because they had to, because they could. Because when the world looked away from Ethiopian Jews dying in camps and deserts, a few people said, "We're not going to let them disappear." A fake resort in enemy territory, operated by secret agents, smuggling thousands of people out by boat under the cover of night. It sounds fake, but every part of it is true. So the next time you hear someone say nothing good ever happens in the shadows, tell them about this. Tell them about the beach resort that was really a rescue operation. About the scuba instructors who were really spies. About the silent nights that changed thousands of lives forever. Tell them that sometimes when nobody is watching, people still choose to do the right thing. If this story hit you as hard as it hit us, let us know in the comments. What surprised you the most? Could a mission like this ever work in today's hyper-surveilled world? Tap like if you think the world needs to hear more stories like this. And if you're into the wild, dramatic, real stories they don't put in textbooks, hit subscribe, we've got plenty more where this came from.